Thank you. So, do we have any debate on this paper, please? Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. I've been quite patient for all of that. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers for running what appears to be a really good competition, well presented in this paper. First thing I'd like to say is I'm not without sympathy for the public speakers earlier on, the Highcliffe residents, who seek a dedicated local community facility. But of course, the purpose of this sale, as we've already heard, is to generate a capital receipt for the City Council, which will, by design, benefit service provision, housing provision, whatever, across the whole district in its entirety. So, on balance, the KG5 Pavilion and the Bar and Leisure Centre are excellent facilities that many other communities, indeed my own, would give their eye teeth to live on top of. And I think, on balance, it is quite reasonable to suggest that the value to them of those facilities on their doorstep at the moment probably outweighs their request for a community facility. As I say, the paper we're asked to scrutinise before it goes to Cabinet describes a competition for site disposal. And that competition seems to be, from the evidence presented in the paper, to be sound. I do have one quibble. The preferred bidders business model is focused around, I quote from their website that I've just checked, with independent lifestyle support services. That is limited to domiciliary care by design. They don't offer nursing care. And so I do have difficulty with subpara 6 and the recommendation, which says it includes essential healthcare provision. I think that is stretching a point. That is not what the preferred bidder offers. That said, I think that's a relatively minor point in the paper as a whole. And finally, I just point out to Councillor Godfrey that my 84-year-old mother-in-law visits the gym twice a week of her own volition. Sometimes I perhaps wish she didn't, but I don't think that's that uncommon these days. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any other debate on this? Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am pleased, if not a little confused, that the depot proposal for this paper is to be sold for primarily residential purposes. Exactly as I proposed in the August council meeting on the local plan, and which was so roundly rejected by the administration. And yet here we are, supporting a paper, or I suppose we'll be supporting a paper that calls exactly for the intensification of residential development on brownfield sites that are in our ownership. So you know, I'm delighted that the administration is following my lead, and long may that continue. It should reduce some pressure on greenfield sites in the next version of the local plan, and I think that's a good thing. The sale of this asset, or any asset, is not ideal in principle. We shouldn't be releasing our valuable land. We should be looking long term to the future of funding and financing of this council. And the absence of any tie-in to the neighbouring leisure centre is disappointing. It has always been the expectation that we would develop a rehabilitation centre, perhaps by a firm such as Hobbs or similar, or to have a centre of excellence for use by the armed forces, as was actively investigated under the previous administration. So that's what we were hoping for. However, these points, I have to acknowledge, are outweighed by the proposed purchase price, which I hope will be achieved without undue delay.
Thank you. Is there any further debate? Councillor Clare.
Thank you, Chair. Well, 7 years it's been sat there unused. And, you know, I drive past on a regular basis and think, come on, what are we going to do with this? But I really feel that this is good for the community. And like Councillor Pett said, I wish we had something like this where we are, or even half of what you're proposing. We'd give our eye teeth for it. We really would. I feel this accommodates the community aspirations for the local area. I too am a little bit confused about to include essential healthcare provision. That worries me just a little bit. I must admit. But on the whole, I support this, and there we are. Very good. Thank you.
Councillor Butho.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We all understand that there is a growing crisis in terms of ageing population. So I think I'd like to say thank you to the officers and to the leader for bringing this paper forward. I think it will address those sort of all aspects or sort of a proportion of those sort of growing need for accommodation. And I think the fact that it's been done by procuring or sort of gaining a significant income for the council, which can offset some of the borrowings that we made previously, I think is going to be obviously beneficial, not just for Winchester, but as I say, for the wider district. So yes, fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butho. Okay, so coming on to back to the recommendation that we scrutinise and comment on the proposals. So the points I've taken down was for the results of the 2022 consultation to be published, or at least the slides that you used to consult back to residents on. I also wrote down consider the parking and access to the shop, because although we've covered the access to the shop, we haven't covered where people popping into the shop might park should they wish to do so. We need to alter the climate section to be factual that we don't have control over the environmental measures by planning or as a council, and therefore to say it will meet the highest standards is not guaranteed. And we also need to adapt item 6 in the purpose. That's to say that it includes essential healthcare provision, may not. So that's the proposals from Scrutiny to Cabinet before they approve the paper tomorrow. Councillor Todd, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, I'm very happy. I mean, obviously, clearly we need to investigate those points. I think there is a point, but I don't know if it is public or not, about the care home operator, whether that needs clarification. And I think there is a second point that we will need to explore tomorrow, because certainly at one stage in the process, people were asked for how they would fulfil the objectives of the council plan. And so I think there is a point that we will seek to clarify tomorrow about exactly when and how bidders express their intentions as to environmental standards.
Sorry, Councillor Todd, I'm just summing up this paper.
Okay, so I think there was a point, just almost correction of the record, that we wanted to clarify, because there was a reference to McCarthy and Stone operating. No, it's that they constructed, it's not that they operated.
If I may, Chair, because it's interesting, it was helpful that Councillor Pett made the point, because that illuminated the concerns of the committee in this respect. I think we need to make it really clear the developer builds the care home. It's not intention the developer runs the residential care home. That will be leased out to a care provider. That care provider has to be registered with the CQC. They will undertake registered activities in there, which will include nursing care and personal care. So that paper doesn't deal with this, because this paper deals with disposing to a developer that builds a care home and then provides it to a care provider. So hopefully that gives you some additional information in respect to that.
But I mean, I suppose the point is we will in public session tomorrow make sure to respond to the points of scrutiny that have been made, and particularly, for example, the environmental point, the point about health will both be points that we address and discuss tomorrow.
Thank you, because they can't be guaranteed when we don't have the control or guarantee. So, which by approving the paper as it is, sort of assumes we do. Does anybody else have any other points they wanted to have me to add to the list? Okay, then do we feel we've thoroughly scrutinised that paper and can move on to the next item? Agreed. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your engagement. So Councillor Todd, are you going to present to us, and could we keep it concise, please?
No, I'm not going to present to you. I mean, as you
Oh,
know,
right.
there will be a presentation
This
made
is
to
intro
you.
by Councillor Todd and Housen, so I'm pleased Housen.
As you know, we're very keen to get input from across the council for our council plan from 2025 to 2030. We've discussed this with parish councils, which to bid to policy committees, amongst others, and now we want to hear this committee's views. We do have a brief presentation which Simon Housen, who's the Senior Policy and Programme Manager, will take you through, and then we're very happy to hear your questions, listen to your views and get your insights as to what you think we should be considering as we move towards a proposal of a council plan.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Now I shall finish my introduction. It was a question as to whether you could be concise, not over to you. So we have a recommendation that the scrutiny is asked to consider the priorities in the current council plan and to review and comment on these. We were offered the opportunity as a scrutiny committee to feed into the paper at this point and then to scrutinise it again at November's, but due to the proximity time-wise, it's only just over 3 weeks before we do that, and being as it has already gone to both policy committees, I felt it prudent that we go through the whole thing now rather than having to do a little bit now and then do it all again in November. So I hope that you agree with that, particularly given the packed agenda we have in November. Mr. Housen, over to you to introduce and give our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Chair, for that introduction. I will keep it concise. You would have all seen the presentation. This is the third presentation. It's been altered slightly for this evening. As already been said, we attended the two policy committees in last month. A little bit of background here around, obviously, the current council plan was adopted by council in January 2020. We're now into the final year of that 5-year plan, which was 2020 to 2025. The plan effectively runs through to 31st of March next year. This very much provides us with an opportunity to review the outcomes and the priorities for the council and the wider district. The priorities will be evidence-based. We've recently undertaken the resident survey. We'll be looking at the results of the resident survey, the opinions and views of our residents, as well as the young people that took part, as well as members, the parish councils that we spoke to earlier in the year, businesses and staff engagement. So as I said, this is the council plan will be a 5-year look forward to March, 31st of March 2030, and will support the council to deliver a balanced budget in the future. Recognising that the council plan and the budget fit very closely together, it's very important that what we set out in the council plan is affordable, and that is kind of featured in the MTFS and the budget that will come to you next February. So important considerations there. The next slide there is very much a reminder, and it was included on your agenda for your information there. The current council plan, we do kind of refer to it in terms of your thinking and ideas for the coming council plan, with the 5 priorities in the current council plan: that tackling the climate emergency, housing and homes for all, living well, vibrant local economy, your services, your voice, but also recognising those 4 enhanced priorities, those additional areas that we agreed more recently. The cost of living, obviously more recently than when we last approved the council plan, greener, faster, pride in place and listening better. If I quickly go through some of the engagement that we've done to get to where we are today. So we had liaison with parish councils back in June. We've had the resident survey and young person survey that I've already referred to, presentations to economy and housing, health and environment policy committees, and good feedback received from those meetings. Engagement with the wish to bid, so local businesses, as well as the voluntary sector. Scrutiny meeting this evening, looking at that more cross-cutting priorities, performance and the overall plan. So taking that more holistic review and obviously feeding into the priorities that will go forward into the plan itself. Has already been referred to their draft plan to be considered by Cabinet on the 11th of December with a recommendation for adoption at Council in January 2025. I'll just quickly recap on the journey that we've been through with the policy committee. So economy and housing, look specifically at homes for all, vibrant local economy, pride in place, health and environment, as you would imagine, living well, cost of living, climate emergency, greener, faster. This scrutiny committee to look at the overall plan performance, your services, your voice, and listening better. The next slide there, and there are many different emerging challenges, and actually to the previous two policy committees we actually teased out some of those challenges that were pertinent to the priorities relevant to the responsibilities of those policy committees. We tried to make this slide a little bit more generic and relevant to this committee, but they're relevant to all of them. There are probably no real surprises there with what those emerging challenges are, and we've arranged them under that pestle arrangement, if you like, looking at what the impacts might be to us. So they are important considerations for us as we move forward, thinking about our priorities and what we want to achieve over the next 5 years. I won't go through all of them, as I said, they're in front of you, and I doubt there are any there that are a surprise. So to help the thinking tonight and to encourage the feedback, really what I want to do is provide a little bit of engagement and feedback. Apologies for the spelling error at the top that I just spotted. So from the environment, greener, faster, need to protect our waterways and water courses, respond to the climate emergency and the nature crisis, and planning and to be more resilient to extreme weather, the hot weather in the summer and the cold weather in the winter. Better rural transport options, we've heard that a number of times through the engagement sessions that we've done, as well as improved air quality and minimising the environmental impact of new communities stroke development. So that's some of the feedback that we've received from those engagement sessions that we've held, and as well the policy committee that we were at last month. So if we look at healthy communities, support for young people, that came up many times, including those with mental health problems and anxiety, particularly relevant after the COVID pandemic, obviously, but none more important than it is now. Aging population, we're very aware of that. The Census 21 data showed us that the population of the district is increasing. The age is increasing very much too. Vulnerable pensioners or elderly people that live in our district. Impact of cost of living crisis, no surprise there that that will have an impact and continue to have an impact on our vulnerable residents. Focus on real life connections, social inclusion, people getting out, people meeting people, having places to meet where people can socialise, where people don't feel that they cannot get out and meet other people and have those real life connections. Access to healthcare is important, access to GPs, access to dentists. We hear this many times from our residents that this is an increasing and growing problem, as well as more opportunities for sport and recreational activities. We recognise that active lifestyles do lead to healthy lifestyles as well. Housing, good homes for all. So more affordable housing to meet the diverse needs of our residents and population. And I think that's important that we put in their diverse needs. It's not just the small properties, it's not necessarily three-bed, it is across the board, recognising those needs from across the district, from our residents. Housing, and very relevant to the previous paper that we've heard of obviously this evening, support for our growing elderly population and having the right accommodation, the right housing for that elderly, that growing elderly population. Private rental market concerns, fewer landlords. If we have private rental landlords that start to sell up because of concerns with the economy, etc., that could put less availability in the private rental markets for tenants that choose or can only afford to rent. The need for energy efficient homes with lower bills for tenants, never more important with increasing energy bills and demands. Customer service for our tenants, recognising that that's an important connection between the council and our tenants, and affordable homes for young people. We know that house prices are increasing and often outside the reach of a lot of young people that have grown up in the district and want to stay in the district, and often move outside of the district to affordable accommodation after they finish studying. Looking at the economy, really keen on thriving places, a vibrant local economy. So support for our vibrant market towns, recognising Bushes, Waltham, Alresford, Denmead, those towns that are not in the southern parishes and around in our district. Regeneration, looking at central Winchester, Station and Poach, putting the importance into those regeneration areas and focusing on those in the council plan over the next 5-year period. We heard about from those engagement sessions, the need for low-cost startup space for individuals, those entrepreneurs, those people that have an idea but are lacking those space and may well be working from home at the moment. All they need is a start. They need a location, they need a base to be able to start, grow their own business and hopefully become something far bigger. Support for small businesses with digital connectivity. We heard about the issues that are in those areas with poor broadband connectivity and how it affects their businesses and how they're able to connect to the digital world. So that really is important to support those small businesses with that essential connectivity. Support for rural businesses as well, again, outside of the city. Need for improved public transport. We spoke about how that influences and impacts on our local economy. The public transport in rural areas supports young people as well as older people to be able to get to work, to be able to fulfill their needs. And local skills shortages to deliver new homes and regeneration. We recognise that to build new homes, we need those essential skills to be able to support that house building in the future. And then finally, our services, how do we do it? This is about us as an organisation. We absolutely need to reflect how the council will move forward over the next 5 years, recognising the need to digitalise and improve our services and drive efficiency. To listen better to our residents and provide value for money for our services, we need to build that into our council plan, set those priorities and those actions and those projects that will deliver those priorities over the next 5 years for ourselves as well as our residents and businesses. I've outlined the journey that we've been in so far, those engagement sessions that we've held with the policy committees, the businesses, and where we're at now. And as I said before, the current council plan was included with the agenda pack for you. So these are the questions that we've posed to the policy committees. The leaders already alluded to this feedback and how that will influence and support us setting the priorities for the next draft council plan. So we've got a couple of key questions there that we'd like to open out to invite feedback from members that will support us to build and develop the next council plan. So the first question there is, how has the demand for our services changed since 2020 and how might it change over the next 5 years? Chair, if I may, can I pause there and invite feedback and take one question at a time rather than go through them all?
Who would like to speak there? Councillor Power?
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Housen, I found the engagement feedback very interesting because, as you know, I like to dwell on a KPI. And listening better, there are several items in the engagement feedback which are well without our remit, so rural buses and digital provision. However, there are some that the residents tell us that is what they want to hear, what we are doing to improve that. And you know, we always come back to a KPI that means something sensible to the man on the number 67 bus. I think we have an opportunity to use that, but we need to find an easily quantifiable measure to evidence that we have made an improvement where it is within our remit. Is that a sensible way to move forward?
Chair, I completely agree. Making those KPIs quantifiable as well as achievable will help us to demonstrate that we're achieving those priorities in the council plan. So we are aiming to have a review of the current set of council plan KPIs after the council plan has been approved for implementation from the 1st of April. I think that's a really good suggestion that we look at having quantifiable KPIs that will help support demonstrate that success.
Councillor Powell, could you not mention the number 67 bus again, because most of the district won't have one.
Chairman, I think it's really important to say, use the language that residents have used to us when we are looking at a KPI. Officer speak has got a tendency to come into this, and we don't want any of that, do we? Thank you.
And Councillor Cutler, we do have a bus in Denmead, but not once the funding runs out from the West Waterloo bill. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to how our demand for services has changed since 2020 and how it might change over the next 5 years? I do have one. Our community centres are tired. A lot of them are reaching end of life. How can we support our communities with the restoration or establishing other community centres? Councillor Todd pulled up. Oh, good point, face. I think I said something positive.
No, I think I sort of touched on that actually in an earlier response. I think looking at community facilities across the district is a very important question, and it does need to be looked at across the district rather than saying, these people have asked for one here. I think having a good sense of what provision is and how we support healthy communities and making sure that the resources and assets are in place for those communities is an important question. Whether that sits within a local plan or there's another mechanism for doing it, it's a good challenge. I think I wouldn't just frame it in terms of community centres. I mean, I've talked about the fact that, Stanmore, which is, I think, 4 times the size of Highcliffe, or maybe more, there's a real problem with their facilities, or many of their facilities, reaching the end of life. But I think before we leap into anything, we need to understand the picture more widely. And yeah.
This is Councillor Laming.
Yeah, I'd like to back that up as well. Being chairman of the Badger Farm and Oroders Battery one, life is very difficult for community centres. The world has changed. We were very fortunate in what we did during the pandemic, which helped us enormously, but a lot of them are getting very old, and maintenance is a huge problem. And trying to keep them energy efficient is even greater. So I think it's a way of the council communicating with the community in a large way, because we do provide lots of things, and we're being asked to provide more by the NHS.
Agreed, Councillor Laming. One moment, Councillor Cutler. And also with regard to, we're looking at the climate emergency and achieving that by 2030. If our community centres were actually supported in some way to modernise, to improve the heating facilities, that sort of thing would help.
I think we've done a lot with SIL and other big pots and the like to help people with solar facilities and other ways of improving their facilities. But I think there is a slight watch out, which is if we always do everything on a bid-based basis, then we hear from the organisations that are maybe better organised, happen to have a stronger committee, or maybe in a more in an area that has more people with the skills or the time to be able to support those particular facilities, and then other areas where people may be time poor, resource poor, may not get the attention they need. So I think it's a fair challenge. I mean, we are collecting ideas and thoughts at the moment. I think that's a really helpful insight, because it's something I've seen directly myself and I've heard from others. It's a conversation. I mean, obviously, Councillor Laming, I mean, we're not in a situation where any of us need to declare interest, but Councillor Laming is involved in the Badger Farm Community Centre. Hearing you say it from Denmead is one exactly what I wanted to hear from this committee, because it says, hang on a minute, we may need to look a bit more widely what's going on here in terms of facilities across the district.
Yeah, I wasn't specifically talking about Denmead, but part of our community centre has been condemned. Councillor Cutler.
Yeah, I'd agree with this point about looking at it more widely. I think Councillor Power mentioned earlier about the difficulty of actually running some of these places and making sure that they are what is slightly more than nice to have. And an example I give is Southwark. Southwark has a wonderful hall. It's a village that's made lots of money out of the D-Day revival, so it's got wonderful facilities. It can't make them pay. it can't afford the maintenance because it's not a big enough village. And so it's getting that balance right. So I'd agree with Councillor Todd there about it's really important for us to look at it, but it is to look at it very widely about what's sustainable in some communities, because some communities just cannot sustain good facilities. They're not big enough.
Completely agree. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. I echo what Councillor Cutler's just said. I think it's interesting that some of the village facilities out in the more rural communities are able to manage those sites perhaps better, simply because there's usually somebody in the village who will take on the day-to-day running of those facilities and keep their eye out on what grants are available and all that sort of thing. Whereas I suspect in the more urban areas, it's a facility that perhaps doesn't attract that sort of level of care, not without good reason. I wonder if it's something that should be in the plan, that we enable those facilities to learn from each other and have a much better way of finding best practice and that sort of thing, and making best use of the grants available from the county, from Winchester and all the rest of it. And the setting up of community interest companies to run them and that sort of thing. I think there possibly is a role for us to facilitate that. Thank you.
I do have another thought about what's changed. So since 2020, where COVID hit, outside space became very important. And I wonder if there's an opportunity somewhere in the council plan to look at, is there any opportunity to allocate more space for allotments around the district or some such? More greater self-sufficiency, homegrown, local.
Yes, I think, I know that in some areas we have difficulties letting allotments, in other places we have massive queues, but it is, and I think it's a parish function. It is a parish function, I think, but that doesn't mean that it's not one we can, that there may be a mechanism for us to take a coordinated approach, and just in understanding the need. It may be that in some areas there haven't been, there hasn't been enough thought of it, and there isn't any provision at all. Don't know.
Councillor Powell, eager to get in.
Alsford has just opened a new allotment site with, I think, 15 full-size plots on it, some of which are subdivided, and it is the parish responsibility. They're going very well. One of the problems is in the villages, because New Alsford Town Council obviously restricts those allotment sites to people living within the parish. The villages, they have far more difficulty in finding land for allotments and indeed running the management of that, and it is a burden for a very small parish.
So if you could consider looking at that, that would be great. I can support the communities with that. Does anyone else have any ideas? Councillor Click.
Thank you. Well, I must say, I think we've done well over the past few years, so I'm going to congratulate you, whether you like it or not, but I will. Obviously, since COVID-19, retail services have somewhat suffered, have they not? And going back to the rural market towns and where I live, we now have another facility that has gone into liquidation and closed. We now have 3, and we are quite concerned in Wickham how it's going at the moment. So but I will say that Winchester, with some of the grants, do very well indeed. So they come across well. National government, I think they should start to recognise the strength of local government a bit more, and the level of trust placed in councils by their residents. But could I please again put in a plea for the rural people? And I know it's been said many a time by a lot of councillors, it is not always Winchester based. Please remember us out in the parishes. I know you say, oh, we're coming out, well, that's fine, but you might come out once, twice a year if we're lucky, but you don't come out enough and talk to us really. And transport, oh, it would be lovely to see a bus, especially in Knowle, because I think they've just taken away the last bus in Knowle, so they have nothing out there, haven't they? Number 20
Nobody's
bus.
going to be able to use their lovely retractable bollards anymore.
But on the whole, I think we've done extremely well, and we just need now to continue, go from strength to strength. And I'll tell you what, to achieve the ambitions for the future, it can be done, but it's got to be done together.
Thank you for that. I mean, one of the strategic pillars that we're thinking about, that sort of touched on it earlier, that we started off in pride in place, but we actually thought about it and said we need to make it plural. It needs to be places, because we actually need every place in the district to thrive. So either it's pride in places or thriving places or something like that. Thinking about how every bit of the district offers what people need, and absolutely, you know, sometimes we fall into the trap of saying, well, let's look at footfall in Winchester. Well, there are ways of getting footfall in Wickham as well, and Alresford, and Bishop Saltham, and Whiteley, and I don't know if you can get it in Denby, but if you can, I'm sure we will. But it would be useful to have that understanding as to how those places, you know, to look at them on an equal basis rather than just saying how many people went down the high street. Obviously, it'll be an order of magnitude or two higher in the high street, but that doesn't mean that we want all of these other places to. We need all these other places to thrive as well, and finding ways that are resource efficient and don't completely knock us over in terms of workload of doing that, I think would be a really productive thing to do.
You mentioned buses. I know that Hampshire help with community buses and the like, but do we have any grants we could put forward for support with anything like that in the rural areas?
Yes, I mean, obviously the next council plan needs to be looked at in the context of the funds we have available, and Hampshire is the Highways Authority, and there's a lot going on in the area of community buses. I believe we have put some money into that kind of space in the past. We need to check exactly where that stands at the moment and check that it's being used efficiently. It's one of those outcomes that if we listen to people, we know we have to find a way between us all, between the tiers, of making it work. Because it really matters, and the more we hear back from people, the more we're hearing that, you know, bus services is really important to people. We have limited levers to pull, but knowing what the ambition is and thinking about how we can make a difference remains a priority. And for example, I mean, one of the mechanisms we have, part of the ways may be looking for vehicles for joint working with Hampshire. So, for example, we are looking at bus infrastructure in the city through the City of Winchester Movement Strategy. We look at walking and cycling infrastructure through the LC WIP, which we're joint partners on, or supported partners on. I think we're funding one of them. You know, the bus infrastructure, the world of BSIPs and bus service improvement plans and the like is very focused on the upper tier. But that doesn't mean that we can't have conversations with them about possible mechanisms or ways of helping to tackle that need that we know is there.
Councillor Godfrey.
I'm sure there's some very good things happening in Wickham Ward, which I'm not aware of, but I don't share Councillor Clear's sunlit uplands view of the world in this council. Primarily because I think that progress on so many different delivery projects has been very, very slow. And we've said this all, you know, over many years. And while the projects themselves are admirable, many of which we actually started more than 5 years ago, they're still yet to be delivered. I know that because post-project reviews, which we're meant to see in audit and governance, we haven't seen yet in the last 18 months. So it's disappointing, but delivery timescales for our more important projects are painfully slow, and we should consider that as an area of concern. On the subject of rural transport, accepting Councillor Baffo's personal interest in this, buses are hideously inefficient. They are expensive to run. They are not well used, and they don't go at the times or locations that people want them. And so 65% of the residents of this district who live outside the city do not have access to decent public transport. And therefore we have to look at it from a different perspective. We need to focus far more on making the need to travel less of an imperative. We need to stop pretending we can rely on public transport, and stop and support anything which reduces the need to travel, so that we can reduce congestion, reduce pollution, reduce unnecessary use of our resources. And why I think the continued provision of small grants for our not-for-profit organisations is really good, and I hope it will continue and grow. It's only £1,000 a year for each parish, or however much people bid for. And we need to think of more interesting ways, more practical ways to make amenities in rural areas more accessible and more available, so that we can achieve a better environment, a better outcome, without trying to pay for expensive public transport.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. The next one I had on my tick list was looking at connectivity. We do have quite good connectivity, but how can we influence that going forwards digitally on new housing developments? Is there something we can do about that through local planning? And that sort of falls into the helping to support less need for travel as well.
I believe we can, I believe we are. I can't remember the details of it. I think it's something that is reflected in the local plan, is now an expectation of all new housing. That whole discussion about digital connectivity is a very good one. I think it's one, again, it's one where we need to think about what we're trying to achieve, and then carefully think about whether it's being delivered by the market in particular or other national government programmes. That's why Hampshire has withdrawn effectively from the broadband expansion programme, because of the change in government priorities and the methods of delivering it. So again, I think us being clear what it is we want to achieve, and then working out how to do that in the context of a very rapidly changing policy environment is a relevant thing to aim at. I don't know what the answer is in terms of ways of for district councils to drive expansion of improved broadband, or past broadband. You know, the sort of the higher speed connectivity that people need. Certainly, when I looked at the figures, both Hampshire and Winchester are way below where we would want them to be compared to the rest of the country. Dare I say it, it sounds like the kind of thing that might even be the sort of thing a scrutiny group would look at. But
Exciting. Can I give you my next thing?
Get on.
change from electric cars to hydrogen. We've had an awful lot of focus in our council plan about electric cars. Hydrogen has been bandied around for a while, but seems to be a little bit more earnest now. Is there anything we could look at towards that? I mean, if we think in 6 years' time, things are changing quickly. Do we need to think about that at all?
Yes, I mean, obviously, we ourselves directly, aside from electrifying our own fleet where possible and decarbonising our own fleet, have mainly taken an enabling role rather than a leading role on the question of electrification. We've put policies in place to support it in new developments. We have a plan, a very important plan, I think, for a local area energy plan that will look at our energy needs and how energy is generated. In terms of hydrogen, there is a lot going on a national level. There are projects looking at how it might be delivered, I think, in the docks in the Southampton and in the Southampton area. And if hydrogen is something that is, looked at for Southampton, and they're looking for how to expand its usage more widely, then it'd be hard to see how Winchester district wouldn't have a role in that. But I think my bias would be to say I don't think we can double guess the market on this one. We need to be ready to support those changes when they come through in the way that we're generally favourable towards EV charging or electricity generation or other methods of decarbonisation. But I don't think it's for us to say, and we don't have the financial strength to be able to go, you know what, we're going to, have a city council owned hydrogen generation plant or station.
But a target to say we're going to keep a watchful eye and adapt accordingly would be useful.
I think we need to be supportive of not just sort of heavily proven new low carbon technologies, but also enabling trials and other things would be an approach I'd be very happy with.
I'm also going to pop in there very briefly wind turbines, and then I'm going to move on to recycling facilities, because we're aware that the Super MRF has been in the offing for a long time through Hampshire County Council. I know we thought about food waste and how our recycling should be done. Is there any more we could do that perhaps investigating what our neighbours are doing, that wouldn't mean shipping it too far outside of Hampshire to do more recycling?
That actually came up at the County Council's Cabinet meeting this morning. There is a recognition that, and it was a case that some of us in this room have been making for a while, that if the county looks at what it's doing in isolation, rather than taking a whole system approach, looking at what the collection authorities, the disposal authorities, how we're using our various land holdings, what facilities we need, etc., in order to find a way to drive up recycling in a way that's financially affordable for all partners. Also, the role that parishes can play, community sector. There's lots of different partners interested in this topic, and the intention the county has, and will be first in the queue to make it work, is to say, how do we design a waste system collectively between the authorities of Hampshire, Portsmouth, Southampton, that is better than the current one. Project Integra, introduced under the Liberal Democrat administration in the last century, has got as far as it will go, and it needs a refresh, and we need to put a rocket under it. But I think the thing that will need to change is we need the county council, shall we say, take a slightly more partnership approach in terms of how we move forward on this, rather than presenting districts and the public with various ultimatums in terms of how they propose to develop facilities, which then get rejected. So I think it is absolutely something that we need to be very serious about, working with county and our neighbours and our partners as to how we can accelerate recycling. I'd be surprised if that didn't make it in there.
As a complete side note, since they brought out the new bottles with the lids that don't quite come off really annoyingly, I wince every time I put that in my recycle bin. Like, I have no idea if those lids are actually recyclable in Hampshire or not, because the plastic guidance was always, is it a bottle, yes or no? If the answer was no, it's not recyclable. If the answer is yes, it is. The lid, I don't know. It makes me wince every time. I don't know whether that's meant to be in my recycle bin or not.
I'm sure we can put that in scope.
It wants to contaminate, but you know.
I think the intention of the connected lid is because it's made of the same material. It's something they've been pushing for, and it's to enable the whole thing to be recycled together.
Supposedly, but it still puts me on edge. Anyway, there endeth my brain dump. Does anyone else have anything else? Councillor Clare?
One more thing you've got up there, residents and businesses tell us we need to improve, especially residents. The Winchester website, I get a lot of complaints that they get to a certain department and it's so difficult to find where they've got to go just to ask a question. And when they did the local plan Reg 19 to put in their comments, some people said they went round the houses for ages and unfortunately gave up halfway through because they couldn't actually get there. So I'm just passing on what I'm hearing from residents.
Councillor Clare, my brain dump was just on the first point, because that's as far as we've got so far. Councillor Wallace?
Yeah, it's been good to hear all the everybody talking about the different ways that we can do greening. The climate emergency is not going away. It's only going to get worse over the next few years. And we're seeing the effect on our biodiversity as well. So in terms of new ideas, I think we've got a lot of the ideas. We've talked about a lot of them in the last few minutes. But our challenge, I think, as a council, is to progress them faster. A lot of the times we do a lot of talking and not so much, sometimes the delivery is a wee bit behind. So it is something that I think will be good to see us focus more on over the next few years. You might have spotted why we changed the strategy to greener faster in the most recent reiteration of the council plan. And indeed, if you look at how much progress we've made in decarbonisation and on that agenda, and compare us to any council you can find, we're more than happy to compare our record for our speed and pace of delivery and the scale of reductions that we've made. And what we've also found when we've done some benchmarking is we've delivered decarbonisation considerably faster than people who haven't set as ambitious targets as we have.
Councillor Laney?
But that said, the job isn't done. We recognise
I've
we
moved
have a
to
lot.
Councillor Laney and Councillor Todd. Thank you.
I just decided to be my brother for the evening. Somebody mentioned that magic word, hydrogen. We did have the opportunity to trial hydrogen cars, if you remember. And we also had a demonstration of a hydrogen bus outside the Guildhall. So I'm just wondering if you've pursued any of that more.
In practice, the council doesn't have any cars. So particularly we have vans and we have trucks, but we don't, and we commission buses. In terms of buses, obviously we're dependent on what partners can do. And we're dependent in many cases, particularly if we're looking at something that's higher cost than the norm in seeking outside funding. I mean, as said, I think we're very open to working with partners to see how we could use those technologies more. But for example, the hydrogen car that we tried was one that's very firmly in a pilot stage and not ready for deployment in service use for the council. And that's a good example of where there are relevant trials, we're happy to contribute towards them. But for deployment, we would need, I think, a more advanced available ecosystem than.
To be fair, those cars were trialled down at Milford Haven for 12 months, and we haven't followed that up at all.
I think the Milford Haven trial, as far as I'm aware, received several tens of millions of pounds of government money. So I mean, it's absolutely fine for something for us to look at, but I think we would need to just make sure that we were the right place to be doing it. You know, I think an industrial port is probably a slightly better place to be making trials with hydrogen than a rural district. But as I said, you know, when the moment comes, if the opportunity is there, if the programs open up and the bid opportunities are there and the partners are there, I'd be very keen to do it. I'm very keen to work with partners to see how we can accelerate decarbonisation. You know, we've set a very ambitious target for the district. We're doing everything we can to move that target ahead, and that will include being an active partner with people who are able to help accelerate our pace.
Mr. Howson, I think we've probably covered number 2 as well.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've covered a number of those questions and all great feedback. Thank you. I did put on an earlier slide what further challenges. I mean, there probably are 1 or 2. I have to expedite that list there to work through. But I think it would be important to jump to number 3 there. How well has the 2025 council plan worked for us over the last 5 years? We shared the council plan with yourselves on the agenda. We as you remember, in the past, we have refreshed on an annual basis to make sure it's fit for purpose and the priorities are still correct. But I think it would help us to get a little bit of feedback on that one, particularly as we look to develop the next council plan. So number 3 there, how well has the 2025 council plan delivered to improve services for our residents and performance of the council, and what strengths should we maintain? And more importantly, perhaps, what are the gaps or opportunities that were perhaps overlooked or missed in the plan that we should be including in the next plan? Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any comments on this one? Councillor Clear has obviously already stated we've done a great job. Councillor Godfrey has obviously already said not so much. Does anybody else have any comments on this?
No, we're not perfect, but I think we've had a jolly good try so far.
Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. It comes back to the accessibility of information from our website. I can't find anything on there. And if we want to digitise property, then we need to make it easier for people who can find what they want online to actually find what they need to find.
We absolutely. So digitisation is something that we've effectively added alongside the council plan through the TC25 programme. That is looking at how we provide a better digital experience for people. I think we need to mainstream it, make it part of the main council plan between 25 and 30. That's very much our intention. So what we've learned, you know, will be fully reflected. You know, and let's not forget the improvements that we've made over the last 5 years. You know, when we came to power, recycling levels were lower than they had been 9 years earlier. They're now considerably higher. We've made big improvements to recycling. We've made more positive changes in central Winchester than was managed in the previous 9 years. We've built a new GP surgery that was blocked and not happening. Leisure centre's been completed. It's one thing to have a plan, it's another to make it happen, and is now performing as one of the top leisure centres in the country.
Rural area, because you've listed an awful lot in Winchester.
No, and I think that's a very good challenge. And actually, I had a private session with Cabinet, and this is going to at this point the chief executive is probably going to pass out. But but when we were talking about you know, contributions, I'd love there to be some physical things out there in the district that we could point to and go, yes, look, you know, it is really important in the next council plan that everyone everywhere in the district feels that the city council is making a positive difference to their lives. There's absolute priority, and it will involve some changes. It will mean that we look, you know, looking everywhere by default. Sometimes it's easier to get information about what's going on in Winchester, and so we end up just looking at that. But I do think we need to get better at looking across the district.
But simple things, Councillor Todd, that I've suggested so many times, particularly under the cultural strategy, where I was saying there's so much history within Southwark and Denmead, and particularly in relation to D-Day. We need a walking tour, like here's where the tanks were, here's where the men camped out, here's where the planning was. And I know Southwark Park and the like has its own specific part, but there is so much history right up to Hambledon in that area that's completely been overlooked. A lovely walking tour with some Winchester boards, something simple, healthy, get people moving.
So there is a project that's working on a countywide basis for, and I might ask the chief executive for the name of it. There's a new tourism.
The local visitor engagement plan,
The LVEP.
something like that.
LVEP.
Yes, there's an
That
E in
sounds
there,
like the
yeah.
right. Although it's on a slightly wider scale. I am told also that in order to become a Winchester green badge tourist guide, you need to be able to talk about the entire district. It's part of the training process. So one of the
You've got
things
some swatting up to do, haven't you?
So one of the things we may want to do is to have that conversation with them to say, what can we do more widely across the district? Maybe to put some of those tours in places. Maybe before we know it, there'll be bus and coach tours of Denmead and Southwark and the like.
I suggested
Knowledgeable people telling stories about all the different history.
first visit to Denmead, I suggested it in your first year, and loved it.
But on a practical level, this could also be an area where we also think about, a lot of what we're planning in our cultural strategy is about enabling and networking. So one of the things that Bishop Saltham did, for example, is as you wander around, there are QR codes everywhere, and you can log in and learn about the history of Bishop Saltham as you go around. And I'm sure there could be a QR code somewhere in Denmead.
If you
maybe
recall,
more
as
than one.
part of the arts thing, I disagree with the art thing that you approved recently, but as part of the arts thing, I suggested on the open space, we either used what's our woodpecker's name? I can't remember, to learn about animals, because it's a real woodland walk and we could have all the characters digitized and you scan it on your phone and they come to life, or history. And I suggested both, digitizing. Again, not happened. Councillor Pett.
Thank you, Chair. One thing somebody mentioned, how well we do with visitors. I don't think this is about necessarily visitors. It's about locals within Winchester District. It's about our people, getting those in the city to come out to Denmead, Wickham, Meelstoke, wherever, and vice versa. There's something there that if you go into the tourist office down below, you can pick up a myriad of leaflets on sort of subjects various, but nothing that gives you a feel for what there is. And I think I'd agree with you, Chair, what there is in the district as a whole, and even beyond the district. That's one thing. Second thing, okay, district plans, all the rest of it. To most of our residents, they mean absolutely nothing, unless you make it mean something. Now, there's that one page there that if that was on, and I exaggerate for effect, I suppose, if that was on every billboard in every village and on every corner in the city, people would engage with it and recognise it as such. If it were on the back of the bin emptying calendar, for example, so everybody saw it, so everybody engaged with that. If that's the way we want to present the district, I don't know whether it is or not. But if you want to engage our residents in the council's plan, then you don't do it by just having a thing that sits on a website that they might find if they thought long and hard about it.
If they search and go through 23 documents to find it.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
So there's got to be something there that's tangible to everybody, or as many as we can reach. And it probably comes down to something like a single page vote for, or something like that, that we take every opportunity to push. It is on the back of every letter that goes out from here, or whatever, I don't know. But that would be my view on how we embed it. Sorry? Well, no, okay, yeah, fair enough. But you get what I'm saying. We do send out the bin calendar.
We do, and we miss weeks, don't we?
And
So the last week of the old collection wasn't on it. The first week the new one wasn't. The last people didn't come. It was Helen. Chaos in our road. Chaos.
I'm not going to step into that rabbit hole, but
I think there is a point, and actually when it comes to things like tourism, it's important to take a Hampshire-wide view and a wider view. Yes, obviously sitting in the heart of Hampshire, we're in a good position to tell people about the whole of Hampshire and everything that goes on there. But, you know, if we're trying to get people to go to a pub in Southwark, probably we're better making sure that they know about it in Portsmouth rather than just pushing it through Winchester. So we need a wider view. We need to look at how the whole place works. You know, if we're looking at the Meon Valley, we need people to be thinking, if they're coming from Basingstoke, if they're coming from Alton, if they're coming from Petersfield, so I do think we probably need to take a wider view. But
I agree,
there's
but
a
I do
bigger-
think,
there's-
sorry to interrupt you, that Portsmouth would be way more likely to go to a pub in Southwark than anybody from Winchester ever, because I think Portsmouth people would be far more aware of Southwark than somebody from Winchester.
And it's
I'm
also-
not sure if Councillor Cutler agrees, but that's my view.
No,
It's to do with the landlord up who came from Portsmouth and brought everybody with it.
no. I mean, I'm saying, I think what I'm saying is people in Portsmouth, you know, if you were marketing Southwark to people, you'd start with Portsmouth. You wouldn't start with Winchester. Not all of them, but yes.
So I have to come over drifting. That's nice.
Yeah, it's getting silly now. But I suppose the point is actually having a proper joined up plan for the whole of Hampshire might, in practice, be the best way of making sure that we, you know, and for the South Downs Way and for other various mechanisms to get people from a wider way to look here. I mean, the discussion that we actually want to do, and it's a bigger discussion that sits within devolution and the county's economic development plans and this LVEP that we're talking about, is how to get more people to see our area as a destination generally, and also to get people to enjoy the different aspects of it from within the county as well. And I think we can, you know, let's not forget that our boundary, much as we may love it, is very odd. It's not, if you sat down and said, what's the city region around Winchester, you know, you probably would, I don't know, you might include Stockbridge, but you might, you know, there are places which come to win that it's like it's a product of history, the boundaries that we have, and it's right that we work with it, but it's also sometimes very right that we work with our neighbours. And indeed, one of the bits of input that we had from the parishes, which I thought was quite a useful one, was that they were saying that, for example, if you live in Curdridge and you're worried about your area and how it develops and how it works, actually, it's really important that you know that the city council is actively working with, you know, Eastleigh, looking what's going in Botley, you know, and the other developments in that area, and having that joined up view. So we had a very interesting input from the parishes to say, and we know this is true, for example, in Denmead, how important it is that we're having active engagement with Havant to talk about the future of Waterlooville and working with them on that. So I agree with you. I think I might dispute that we take a kind of hard boundary approach to our plan. Yes, we need to think about all the places across the district, because those are the places that we're responsible for. But when we talk to people in those places, they're looking for us to be supportive for how those places actually work, the places they connect to, the places they relate to, and sometimes the pressures they're facing from neighbouring areas. So I think it's something we need to think about.
Thank you. And when you were struggling for somewhere to say that you wouldn't expect it to be in Winchester, Fort Nelson, which is practically in Fareham, overlooking Portsmouth, really historic place, is in Winchester, but nobody would expect it to be for a single second.
I visited Fort Nelson. I've been there. I've had a look at the Nelson's column, which, as we all know, somewhat randomly, obviously was put up by Portsmouth sailors. And was the first Nelson's column in the country, and some would say by far the finest, and much predates the other one. And I would also I would thoroughly recommend that people visit Fort Nelson.
But you wouldn't expect it to be in Winchester, not
you really
for a
wouldn't.
second.
No, you really wouldn't. But it does have some absolutely fantastic exhibits there. It has the Iraqi super gun. It has a very large railway gun that indeed I was telling Southwest Trains about, Southwestern Railway about only the other day, as they were planning how they were going to celebrate, I can't remember, the centenary of something, or the bicentenary of railways or something like that. And it was like, well, you know, there's this gun, and they didn't know that there was this gun. So expect exciting times on our local railways.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. I was just trying to add to your somewhere you'd never think was in Winchester. Mr. Housen, I'm aware we strayed. What strengths do we maintain? What do we think was good about the previous 5-year plan that we should continue? Just to get us back on track. Does anybody have anything they think we should keep? We either take silence to mean nothing or silence to mean everything's fine. And I don't know which. Councillor Powell.
I think the point is, Chairman, that the plan is not just a 5-year plan. We have seen so many projects that take 10, 15, 20 years to bring to fruition, and it will deliver. It will develop as we go through that. I don't see anything in the current plan that I think we should jettison. We've just got to do more of the same.
Councillor Godfrey, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
I have many thoughts, but we need to do more, certainly. What I can also is why I have the floor, would encourage people to bring up that gun from Port Nelson up to Micheldever for the celebration of the 3rd and 4th of May next year, of the 185th anniversary of the opening of a station at Micheldever, which indeed will be the 200th anniversary of the first public railway in this country.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
It does, Chair.
We need to add to it, continue what we're doing, but do it more and maybe a bit faster. And more visibly. Is there anything else on there that you want us to pick up? I mean, what does success look like? It's hard because it's not a destination, is it? It's a journey. Happy taxpayers. Yeah. Critical projects to deliver, though, we must have a view on this. Councillor Powell.
It comes back to housing and energy reduction. You look at the challenges that are coming at us. It's got to be about people having a decent home to live in, which allows them to access services and education and actually get on with their lives. Thank you.
Councillor Lehman.
Yes, we need to consider local energy generation, using renewables, other innovative ways of CO2-free energy. And hydrogen is a great way of storing it over winter.
Councillor Cutler.
I don't want to jump the gun, but it seems likely that nobody is going to say that the critical project to deliver is actually for us to be solvent in 2030. You know, for us to continue to improve our efficiency. And I know that's not the big exciting stuff, but it's key that this PC25 and the transformation that will move on happens. Otherwise, we won't be able to deliver any of the other things. And that's really important and just needs remembering. And I'm a little disappointed that no one's come up with that.
It was never going to be me, Councillor Cutler. It was never going to be me. Do we have anything else to say on this for Mr. Housen? Councillor Lehman.
Yes, I think it's really important that we consider our cyber security and bring that up to the latest spec all the time.
Absolutely. Completely agree. And indeed, I had an email from a government minister on the subject very recently. So there's quite a lot going on a national level to drive that ahead. Yeah, well, yeah, I clicked on it and it was, but it's interesting. I mean, I've been, you know, I think there's a wider need to also, the cybersecurity question is not going away. I mean, for example, we all know lots of people in Winchester yesterday got text saying that they owed a parking ticket. And I ended up dealing with a piece of, I don't feel disappointed that you didn't get one, Councillor Laming, but I ended up dealing with a piece of casework with somebody who said, was it Hampshire or Winchester who sent me this parking ticket? And the answer, no, it was a scammer.
And in Wickham as well recently.
Well, it must be national. I don't know how but they don't know how to target it. But yes, he was fooled anyway.
Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, another critical project's got to be upgrading all our council homes. I mean, we have an amazing number of council homes, and it's a massive job to upgrade, improve the energy efficiency of all those homes, and it's a big challenge. I get that, and we've only just kind of made a little start, but it'll be a huge challenge. It's something we've got to reach over the next few years. So I think that's got to be one of our key projects. Absolutely, it's in our plan now. You know, we've increased the funding for it from 15 million to 45 million. We've been looking at all kinds of ways to move ahead at pace. That was a good example of one that very much was put through the lens of go greener faster. How do we do more at scale, at pace? Because we've got 5,000 houses to decarbonise, and we haven't got much time to do it.
Okay, any debate on this? No? Councillor Godfrey.
If only to remove the word broadcasted and replace it with broadcast, I'd be much more comfortable with the that form of grammar. And the yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. Mr. Howson, did you want to sum up and say anything else?
Nothing to add other than say thank you very much for that feedback, which will be considered as we develop the next council plan and bring to cabinet in December.
I hope your notes are less chaotic than the discussion was. So thank you all for your engagement on that piece. I think we've scrutinised and fed into that, and I apologise for my brain dump, but I'd had lots of ideas. Okay, so moving on to item 8 on the agenda, to note the latest forward plan of key decisions that includes the period from November 2024 to 2025. Bearing in mind the conversation we had at the start about we will await the response on fly tipping. Does anybody have any questions on the forward plan? Councillor Wallace.
So I just wanted to check. So the council plan is now going to go to cabinet and then to full council. It doesn't come back to scrutiny.
No.
So we don't scrutinise it before it goes to cabinet. Okay. Right. Thank you.
Because it's going to go to cabinet in November. So, and we've already got a packed agenda, so we will have the option to feed back into it in council, should we wish to. Councillor Pett.
Just a small one, thank you, Chair. Could we get the committee dates changed to reflect reality? Because I'm not at the moment, I don't think.
Okay. Well, we haven't spotted any that were wrong, but then
I don't think 20th. Well, I was just checking my calendar. I thought my placeholder for scrutiny is the 12th of November. But I may well be wrong.
Yeah, I think it's not the forward plan link to look at, Councillor Pett. It's the further the document after it's the item 9. I think is the actual plan.
yes, big one. Thank you, Councillor Pett. Other than that, are we happy to note the forward plan of key decisions? Thank you. Moving on to item 9 then, to note the latest committee work programme. So you'll see November is extremely busy. And I'm aware we've had the residents' survey. One thing I forgot to ask Councillor Todd was the assurance that the resident survey will be fully taken into account with regard to the council plan.
Yes.
Thanks. Are we happy to note?
Yes. Yeah.
Noted. I've made a note. Matthew, please can you check our dates? Thank you. Well, that concludes our formal business for this evening. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you.